Hello, welcome to the May 29th, 2026 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can just simply ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Today is the last live stream of the month, which means that in about 2 hours we will start with a Club Cubase Zoom social meetup. I'll put this on the link, so this isn't going to be recorded or captured, but if you want to see the link, we know sometimes that when we put the link in the chat field that it may not show up for a couple hours, so we'll start off by posting the link. I'm going to put the link in the chat field as well, but we'll be starting that in about 2 hours, and it's just a great way to kind of meet people that are on the live stream. It's always really fascinating discussions. So look forward to seeing our regular attendees and meet new people as well. So when you ask questions by entering it in the chat field or sending it directly to Club, you could also email clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase or your Steinberg program that you're using. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, if it's version 13, 14, 15, and which operating system, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all the topics discussed on today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan for creating a website. So we have over 2,000 hours of live stream content and 44,000 questions plus that we've covered. And we want to give a special thanks to Jan for creating that website so you can quickly search for particular topics. We also have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. So what we could do, they are not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience. So we want to give a special round of gratitude to them. And we'll give an extra thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource for the Steinberg community. If you want to find presets, downloads, tutorials, it's a great reference for that. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm the host today. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C., in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started with questions. All right, so we see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, UK. Great to see you on. We see Stefan from Sweden. We have Klaus also from Malmo in Sweden. All right, we have Outer Darkness joining from Northern California. Thanks for being a part of the live stream today. We have Jan in Stockholm. It's cubaseindex.com. All right, so we have Adam Langford from a slightly cooler village in Bedfordshire in the UK. All right, we see Fly V checking in, Vince from Winnipeg, and a Memento from Finland. All right, so we see from Alex from Mojave, Arizona. What's the best way to deal with notes that hang without removing a track, without losing a track in all settings? So sometimes there may be some instruments that, maybe don't receive a note off message. But one thing that you could always do if you have a note that's hanging, some instruments can be more susceptible to, or maybe there's parts in the particular file that are, there's maybe two notes that are, going on at the same pitch, the same time, something like that. So one thing that you could do just to get rid of the notes hanging, if you go to MIDI menu and just hit reset. You could also take a look, and sometimes this is a good time where you could maybe look at, when we come over and look at the MIDI data itself to see if there's maybe a MIDI message, if it's always consistently hanging in one spot. Sometimes if we go to the list editor, this will show you every single MIDI event. So if we look at, if I come over here, let's say, okay, I had drawn in a number of pitch bend information or just other MIDI CC data. So if I'm here, and you see, we have CC11, let's say I have breath control, whatever, just a bunch of other CC or sysx messages. So you may look at it and go, oh, I don't see anything here. But when you go to the MIDI list editor, we can think of this as kind of being more of a surgical, it's going to show everything that's in that MIDI event. And you can say, oh, it always hangs right here when this message comes up. So, and you're going to have the ability of coming over here and adjusting focus. So we could say, okay, I want to focus like on the event types. So now I could see only breath control, or we could see and the subtype. So here's all of my breath control messages. So maybe sometimes when you record, you may have like a common one, maybe aftertouch. So if I'm recording in, I could play just, for instance, a single note. So let's say if I find that it's one particular message, I could select all of the breath control. So we could see this kind of focus area. And if you don't see the focus area, if you go to the setup window, make sure that you have the filters. And now I could just say, okay, I want all the breath control, and I'm going to select all of these particular notes of the breath control, just Control or Command plus A. And then I'll just come over here and we will hit delete, and we will get rid of the focus. And now we can see just the notes and expression. So if I want to come over here, I can say, okay, I didn't intend for expression. So I can say, let's focus on the event type and the subtype. Again, Command A, Control A, close, and then all of our notes will be there. So sometimes MIDI controllers, like I may come over here, record a single note. Let's say if I'm here, I'll just place Cubase into record. And I'm just going to hold down one note. All right, so we look at, and we go, oh, there's only one MIDI note message here. And it only looks like one note, but there could be a lot of other MIDI data. So when I recorded that note, I accidentally pressed down on the keys. So now I can see that, we have one note here. And what we did is we can see that, oh, we have lots of MIDI aftertouch messages. So again, I could say I didn't intend for the aftertouch messages. So I could just say, we want to go to no focus and then say event types and subtype. We can just, again, come over and just say, okay, when I come over to your aftertouch, and we will Command A, select all, delete, and then just our note messages. So see if there's like perhaps a MIDI message that's also causing the notes to hang for you as well. And we hope to see you on the Zoom social in just a little bit. All right. All right, so we see Ibuka first joining from Nigeria. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Outer Darkness. Is there a way to save chord track progressions? All right, so let's say if I come here, I have a chord track. Let's see if we can save it as a track archive. So let's say if I come here, let's see if we could. Okay, so let's say I come over here. So it's not necessarily saving the chord. So let's say if I open this up here, we'll save this project. So this is called May 29th, 2026. I could go to a new project, and we'll just create an empty project. And let's go to File, to Import. and we'll say tracks from project. You'll just come over here. All right, so I could come over here and let's say I just want the chord track. So I could import the chord track from a project. We could also come over to our chord pads. And if we wanted to be saved, let me just adjust our chord pad appearance here real quick. So let's say I have a chord track here. One of the things that we could do, we'll see kind of this little icon directly here. We could assign all of the pads in our chord pads from the chord track. So if I want this to be able to, try out different chord ideas without having to import a chord track, at this point I could just come right over here and that would automatically migrate the chords from the chord track into the chord pads, and these chord pads we can save a preset to as well. So we come over here, we could just choose to save a particular chord track preset so that we can recall it at any time that we want. So we could just come right over here, let's save a preset, we'll call this May 29th 2026. And now when we go to our particular chord tracks, we could come here, say, okay, I want this preset. And at this point, we could just instantly recall different. So it's not necessarily, they will go in order chromatically as they appear. But you could kind of click this little icon here to migrate the chord tracks to the chord pads, and then click here to save a chord pad preset. So now I could just instantly recall. We'll come over here. So if I don't want to resave it. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Okay. All right, so we see Tony Chunza joining from Australia saying hello. All right, so we see from Free Doper or Fry Dopers, his amazing mate. Thanks for joining us today. And Free Doper is from Indonesia. Thanks for joining us by the middle of the night there. We appreciate having you on as part of the community. Great to see Braxel back, saying hi to everyone. We see Beverly Beatty joining probably from Vancouver, Canada. Yes. Balsa from Montenegro. Brian Sawyer from Yuma, Arizona. All right, we see Roland Stuff from Sussex, England. He says he's missing the rain now. We have Jack Bauer joining from New York City. All right, so we see from Outer Darkness is very cool. I love your solution for my chord track question. Thank you. All right, so we have Michael Graybill joining from Dallas. I was in Dallas for a few hours yesterday. Had to do Dorco training at Mansfield Independent School District. Kind of flew in, did the training, and flew right back. So very long day, but it's nice to be back in Dallas for a little bit. All right, so we have Nevos Music joining from Israel. Thanks for being online with us today. Let me jump to a question that was mailed in advance. Okay, so we had a question, and I believe this was a question that was from Soren and from the previous live stream, and he had kind of had the rhythm of a snare, and he sent kind of another explanation video, and we were discussing last time of how to replace all of the chords on a part based on the chord track. So he went through, let's say, the rhythm of a snare and kind of placed And using the step editor, using the chord pads, he, basically had gone through and, let me just turn this off here, and replaced the rhythmic value with one chord throughout, and then he wanted it to synchronize this one chord to the chord track. So I just kind of created this scenario where you have one chord here, and I'll just play this just so we get an idea. So basically I've just kind of played a chord as a placeholder, and now I want these chords to follow the chord track without having to play all the chords in. I kind of want to cheat to make it happen. So I'm going to just come right over here and we will select the track. And then we're going to go to the chords inspector. So once we're here, not in the editor, but the chords inspector at this level. So if we go into the sample editor, you may see there's like chord editing here. We don't necessarily want that. We want to select the track, not to double click the event to have the editor inspector, but we want the track inspector. So I'm going to go to the chords, and then we could see the first choice we're going to have is follow the chord track. So it'll default to off. I'm going to select chords. And we'll get this prompt. Do you want to follow directly or synchronize track? So I'll just choose synchronize. And when you do this, we'll see that the chords will automatically change to match the chords from our chord track. So instead of just playing back one chord, so once again, to do that, select the track, and we want to go to the chords here. So, and this is distinctly different than the chord editing when we're in the editor inspector. So again, just come right over here, chords, and we will tell it, and this will default to off. We want to have it do the chords. And at this point, we could that part will adjust to reflect the chord changes directly from the event there. All right. So Michael Graybill says, hope you got some sleep, Greg. Not too much. It was a 21-hour day yesterday, so I'm a little tired today. But great to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. You see Jay the Jolly. All right, so we see from Jay the Jolly, he says, hello again, folks. I'm curious if the Zoom thing is still on and whether I need an account. I heard I could click on an invite link and just type in a name or something. I don't use chat sites. So you can, if we go to the Zoom and we look at kind of the link here, so if you go to Zoom, so you might have to, you can create a Zoom account, and it may ask you to create a Zoom account where you have like your email and a password. But many times you could also just join the meeting. I think if you go to the Zoom website, you could type in this meeting ID with this password, and you might be able to get in. Like when I help people who don't have Zoom accounts or can't figure out how to do it, you can often just enter the meeting ID plus the passcode. But if you want to try it out, you could maybe create a Zoom account. We'll be starting about an hour and 40 minutes roughly. So you can maybe get an account set up. It might be easier. All right, so we see from Nevos Music, Greg, is it possible to transpose the chords all at once in the chord track, change the scale, but keep all the chords in the chord track? All right, so if I wanted to transpose, let's say I'm here in the key of D major, and if I wanted to transpose, I could go to my root note and adjust this, and all my scales would be the same, but we just kind of changed the root note from like D to C sharp, C. So just select all of the chords and you could also just come here and shift double click and so hold down the shift key and double click on the first chord. That will select all the events right there, and now you could transpose, and we can see that this MIDI that's following the chord track is automatically transposing directly right along with it. So let me know if that's what you want to do, Nevos Music. All right, Flyv asks, what's your best tips on creating drum hi-hat patterns that can be off time from the rest of the drum instruments? Okay, so let's say I want to come over, okay, so let's say, and we could do this kind of within the pattern editor of Groove Agent if you want. So, or well, I think this will kind of work either way. So let's say, okay, so I'm just going to go to my player mode. Let's come over here to the pattern. All right, so let's say we have very kind of traditional. All right, so let's say. All right, so, you know, one of the things that you could do is say, okay, I want it like just on my hi-hat. Some people will come over and just like randomly play hi-hats in. You could also do some other, so let's say the number of steps that I want here is going to be 15 steps. So let's say as we play, I want to do like every other one. And since this is playing 15 steps, like every time it cycles around, this is cycling in 16, and then my hi-hats are cycling in 15. You could also come over here, and if you wanted to do like alternate between my hi-hats playing forward or backward. And then we could just come over and say, okay, I want to adjust the play probability. and I can say let's randomize the play probability, so not every hi-hat will play. So let's say I want to do 16th note hi-hats. So now, like if this is set to 40%, there's a 40% chance that this hi-hat will play. So you can experiment with like play probabilities, and we will see that in our, so if we want to get a play probability here in our lanes, for doing, selecting different MIDI notes, or so that's a way of kind of having randomness as well. So that, 50% of the time this hi-hat will play. So let's say I want to come here and let's make this 30-second notes. So as we come over, and we play this particular pattern, so like where you have 30-second notes, we can say I want these to play back 30% of the time this note. So you can see that this is a very traditional, and you could just kind of randomize hi-hats using like the pattern editor. So let me know if that's kind of makes sense for what you want to do, Vince. Okay, so we see Michael Teams just giving Jazz Dude 1 gallon of chocolate supreme ice cream. All right, so we see Roland Stuff just says, hi Greg, your demo of moving the chord track chords into the chord pads was interesting. Can you then generate chord suggestions around those chords and fill the rest of the chord pads with those? So I don't think we could do the chord pad suggestions, because I think when we come over to our chord pads, that these are kind of set. So let's say if I want to go to, like, we'll just do a quick scale. So let's say a Mixolydian, and let's give myself some blank. All right, so when we go to like our chord definition, so let's say if we're here, there isn't a chord suggestion because these are chords. I think the design intention of these are chords that, are predefined. So if I drag these notes to a chord track, so let's say okay, I want to do F, and we'll put an A here, and I put a chord, like a blank chord here, and let's say, okay, let's make this B flat. That now that we have context of what chords are available, then it can figure out, because when we do the chord suggestions, it's often looking for the chord before and a chord after. So when you come over here, once we're in kind of context of the order of chords, that's when it could come up with the like available chord suggestions. It's like, oh, let's try C sus4. And at that point, we can just listen, and it's using the context of the chord before and chord after, and we could also look at musical proximity to those particular chords or based on circle of fifths, and we could do that for major or minor keys. So having the chords available here doesn't necessarily imply these chords can be unrelated, they can be related, but the order of the chords doesn't necessarily imply which chords work together. You can put a bunch of chords here that make no sense together, and still be able to kind of utilize that as a chord track, as chord pads. But within the chord track, you have the context of where you're coming from and where you're going to, and use that as the basis for the chord suggestion. So, and then once you have that done, you could now, again, come right over here and say, okay, I like that chord progression, and let's have that chord progression directly on our chord pads for us to use and have access to. Wonderful to see Sable Winters on. All right, so we have Siriji Siro Jidin Veziev checking in from Uzbekistan. So you might be our first live person from Uzbekistan. Thank you for joining us, being part of the community today. All right, we have Nico Thompson joining from Finland. All right, so we see Soren says, thanks, Greg, for the better way of doing what I wanted done. Great chords at the snare drum hit. So thanks for taking the time to explain it better so I could understand it. So, all right, so we see from Jay the Jolly says, thanks for showing me, Greg. I'll be trying to set up an account in a few minutes. Yeah, I think it's just kind of signing up. We have kind of a special, I have like a corporate Zoom version that I use, and that's my license, so it may ask you to sign in with your Zoom account. So, all right, you see Michael Teams asking Sable if she's going to make the Zoom, and granting her 1 gallon of raspberry coconut ice cream. All right, Nevos Music says, thanks, Greg, you guys helping me a lot. Always glad to be able to help. All right, Beverly Beatty just says, thanks, Greg, for the transpose trick and the chord track. So yeah, it's really great, when you have a singer that's, it's like, oh, I wish the key was down a half step or a whole step, and you could just find the right key for the singer where they're comfortable without having to redo an entire song or each chord one by one, which I guess you can do if you get paid by the hour. So, all right, so Michael Teams has granted my family and I 1 gallon of pineapple coconut ice cream. Sounds like great flavor, ready for summer. All right, Beverly Beatty just reminding me that I don't employ the cowbell enough. So thanks. So next time I make a drum beat, I'll make sure to put a cowbell in. All right, wonderful to see Raw Justice Hip Hop, just checking in from across the river in Capitol Heights, Maryland. All right, so Flyview says, hi-hats are awesome. Yes, you can do tons of custom beats with them. Thanks, Greg. Yeah. All right, so we see from Sable Winters, says, Greg, last question from Tuesday. I replayed the score editor for lead sheet. It was too fast, hiding tracks. Couldn't see what menu clicked. My chart has tempo markers on every bar. Slower. Okay, so I'll just we'll start from scratch. I'll show you the trick in the score editor. Okay, so we'll create empty. So, and what Sable's question was from Tuesday was how to create kind of a lead sheet, like a chord chart from an MP3 file. So I will come over here. I'm just going to import an audio file to work with. So let's say, all right. All right, so the first thing I did is we want to make sure that when we're doing the chord chart that the chord chart is lining up like on the correct measures. So what we did in this case is did a tempo map. So we listened to the music here. If we did the chords are going to be in the middle of the measure. right, so I'm going to take that, and first thing I'm going to do is go to my project menu to tempo track, and we will say, let's do our tempo detection. Do my analysis of it, and we're going to, as we do this, we'll see kind of our, so I'm going to do offbeat correction. Okay, so now we're just gonna, let's say I'll just kind of start my chord chart. We'll just maybe start it here. Okay, so let's say what I want to do now is I'm going to create kind of an empty part here. All right, that's gonna, like in MIDI, that's gonna last our entire length of the song. So I'm going to add like a MIDI track. Then when I double click, we have a MIDI event that has no notes in it, but it is the same length of the bar. If I come over to my tempo map, what I could do, since we have lots of tempo changes, the score editor will try to reflect those tempo changes. So I'm going to right click in the tempo. We're going to select all of the events, and in the info line we see show in score. I'm just going to choose hide. I'm going to now add a chord track because we want to now do an analysis of the song. I'm going to drag that to my chord track, and this has created all the chords for our song. And we may want to come over and we'll just say, and I'm just going to come like right here to this measure, and let's say this is where we want like our 4/4 to be. So as we, and we could also just kind of take all of the notes on our chord track here if we wanted to. And if the chords are like a little off depending on the performance, if needed, I could just select all the events, and now we could quantize the chords. So I'm going to take my empty part here and then go into my score editor, and now I could see all of the chords laid out for me. Now there's another setting that you could do if you want to, if you're in the score editor already, if you come over here to there's like an interpretive, so if you go to the score settings and go to interpretation, you could also just turn tempo off right there. So if you're here and now you're seeing like what would happen, I will just select all of the events here again, and we'll say we're going to show them in the score editor what can happen. When we go to our blank part, we could see every single tempo change, which may not be desirable. So again, go to your score, to score settings, interpretation, and I'll just turn off tempo and hit OK. And so you could have that automatically blocked. And so, but again, just come directly to, let's say, right click here, select all of the events, and you could hide them in the score editor view. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Sable. All right, so you see from FlyV, it just has the basic structure of chords right on. All right, so we have Super Dash joining us from Munich, in Germany. We see John Costigan retracted his message, but he's on from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff who comments, thanks for explaining the way chord suggestions work, Greg. I sometimes get stuck in a rut when writing, and I'm sure I could benefit from chord suggestions that are out there and off the grid. So yeah, the chord progressions are, I think it's always really good. So let's say if I erase this chord here, let's say we go A flat to E flat to E, and I put in just kind of a blank chord here, you can get very kind of, when you get a proximity for the chord suggestions, just when you come over here, just try out different ideas, and you could just click on the chord to monitor the chord and say, oh, that's awful, I'd never do that. Oh, that one's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, because it's really easy, as you mentioned, we all see it in musicians. Musicians are always playing patterns, and that's why, how mathematics and music are related is they're just a series of patterns. Jazz musicians have different patterns than Baroque musicians, than hip-hop musicians, than blues musicians, and country musicians, and those writings have patterns. So once we kind of recognize these patterns are very easy to get into a rut. Now, the listening audience often likes patterns, when they hear a chord progression that's very familiar to them, and there's a familiarity with it that is always a good thing for the audience, so they can follow along a little easier. And we all know the musicians that every time they sit down at a piano, they play the same thing when they first sit down. How many guitar players will play the same chord progressions every time that they pick up a guitar, just out of rote, out of muscle memory? So it's really easy to kind of get stuck in patterns. And I think like the chord track with its suggestions is a real great way of being able to try out different ideas easily without any kind of workflow consequences. All right, so we have a question. How custom can you adjust the tempo of a track and stay on beat? Pretty much anything, right? So a lot of times, you could adjust, there will be sometimes when something will just feel so off, like if you're doing a tempo and the tempo so let's say if I took, I'll do a quick, we'll just take this song, like even though this song is fluctuating in tempo quite a bit, I'm going to come over here and I'll just do set definition from tempo. So let's say if I keep my downbeats roughly, so as we listen to it. So in the eyes of the computer, this tempo is fluctuating, but it doesn't feel. So, you could come over here, and if you notice, like the downbeats are pretty consistent. So let's say, when I go to this downbeat here, that note is 154, 916. I come here, 153, 348. This downbeat looks a little faster, 161. But a lot of the downbeats, 156, 153. So the downbeats can be pretty consistent, and the other beats can be, more extreme. So let's say if I just want to take the middle beat of this and we'll kind of slow it down but not affect the downbeats, I will come over here and we'll see if it seems really unsettled or not. I've never really actually done this before, but I think if the downbeats are kind of hitting, that the middle can be a little looser. So it's going to take a listen to it and see if the track sounds really off. So So let's say, okay, let's move these up. Let's move these two down, the middle beats here. So just being able to, so keeping the downbeats in their position, you get to have it kind of sound pretty consistent overall, but still have tracks breathe. So, always experiment with tempo. I think, like, even my old school, like when we were just doing MIDI sequencing and we were trying to figure out how to make sequencing sound more human, how to make it breathe, because at that time people were like, oh, MIDI always sounds like a human playing it. And it's like, MIDI doesn't do that. The humans do that in MIDI to kind of not put a lot of effort into it. So I was always the guy that, when you get to the chorus, bump up the tempo 1 or 2 beats per minute and slow down a beat per minute going into the bridge, do subtle little tempo changes. So it's not always the same tempo, but there's no, just do whatever kind of sounds right to your ear. And I think you'll be in great shape. All right, Balsa asks, can render in place as separate events, complete signal path, somehow replace audio mix down multiple? It says, when I want to render each output of a VST that is grouped into group bus has example reverb on it. So let me just set up a scenario here. So, you can do a lot with render in place. Let's say I'll just cut out some events here. So okay, and I'm going to route all these tracks to, let's say, a reverb. All right, so let's say we'll listen to our drums. And we'll make the reverb really large. All right, let me just... All right, so let's say... And let's say all of these now... So let's say can render in place as separate events, complete signal path, somehow replace audio mix down multiple. Yeah, so let's say I just want to do the drums here. So I could just say I'm going to take like these drums. Let's go to render in place. So go to our render settings. I want to do the complete, I'll do these as separate events. And I want to mix down to one channel. Okay, so let's come over. If I did this right. So in essence, what I just did is I did a mix down file, and let me just take it out of record enable for all the tracks here. I'll just check my mix console. Okay. So again, we'll come here to render in place, render settings. So we'll mix down. We'll do a separate events. So now what we've done is when we go to listen to these particular files, we'll hear the reverb automatically be applied to it. So in essence, you can do like a multi-mix down with the effects as separate events and have it automatically rendered directly in to the files. And if you have multiple events selected, you could choose to mix down, which is often what people are accomplishing with exporting the audio. So get the same results. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Balsa. John Koskins just says, hello from beautiful southeast Wisconsin. Says, if it was like this every day, we couldn't afford to live here. Thanks, Greg and everyone. So I was thinking the other day, my nephew is going to be moving north of Milwaukee for a new job next month. Excited for him. All right, so we see from Chapolanami Amagu, why is Cubase unable to match the exact tempo detection found in other DAWs? So, you know, if you have the tempo information in the file, Cubase will automatically read that. Now, sometimes when you're doing tempo detection, so I'll just come over here. We'll create an empty, or we'll just open one up here. When people think that a song is a steady tempo, you know, when the songs have grooves in them, you know, you can, you know, like a groove is basically not where every beat may be placed a little bit ahead or behind. And that will result when you do an accurate tempo detection, that the tempo detection is actually showing kind of the groove of the file. So let's say we come over here, I have project, let's say live recording. So it doesn't sound like, you know, it's a typical live recording. And even with program stuff, we can come over here. So again, we'll do our tempo detection. So when you have, like, you know, we could think of this as being kind of hyper accurate. And, you know, some DAWs, when they do a tempo detection, may kind of just simply roll it off to be a steady constant value. May say, you know, that this is, we look at our tempo field here. You know, they may look at a track like this and say, oh, it's, you know, we look at all the values for the tempo. So it may just say, okay, this is 120, and if you put on 120 beats per minute, it may sound right on some measures. A lot of the beats within the measure will be off. So, you know, what I've found Cubase to always be doing is to actually do, you know, it's a kind of a more serious tempo detection, and when we see the changes within the measure, that's because those particular beats are speeding up and slowing down based on the groove. So when you hear drummers or people talk about drummers, like, oh, they'll be a little laid, you know, they're very laid back on the backbeat, and that means that their beats 2 and 4 are a little slower, or they may, you know, be on top of the beat. That means that they're playing a little faster. So if other, you know, when you program other files and other loops and it exactly matches, then you get the idea that, you know, maybe this is a more accurate reflection of the tempo detection. All right, so we see from Chuluminaire, it says, hi, when chord track and Vari Audio are unable to accurately detect chords from an audio track, even after instrument separation and spectral layers, what other methods would you recommend? So it could really depend. There's a lot of people that use Vari Audio, on a, Vari Audio is intended for kind of a monophonic audio source. So like one sound, one note at a time. It's not really intended to be used with, to determine and to break apart different, different forms of, like a full mix or guitar chord or piano chord. I've found that, and there's a lot of music that may not have chords, and there's a lot of people will say, oh, it's a fifth chord, like a power chord on a guitar where you play like the root, the fifth, and the octave. Now, technically, that's not a triad. It's not a chord. That's a dyad. So there's only two pitches. So there's no chord there. So, really could depend upon the source material. I mean, if it's, so, I've seen a lot of people complain can't figure out the chords when there's no chords in it. Maybe it is just a file that is like predominantly bass and drums, and maybe like some synth hits that are playing single notes. So, there's a lot of songs like contemporary pop music that doesn't really have traditional chords. It may have chords that the singer may follow, but it's not actually, the chords aren't sounding at once. If you have a file that you want to share with me, I'd be happy to show it for Tuesday's live stream. And I could, maybe give you some ideas on how to determine chords from something. If you've gone through isolating it with spectral layers, I'd be happy to kind of, help you with that. All right, so we see next question from Azer1102. How do you get into the score editor? So really all you have to do is the long-standing keyboard shortcut is just going to be Command or Control R. So you select a MIDI event or an instrument track. You could also just go to the score menu and choose Open Score Editor. So again, Control or Command R, or score menu, Open Score Editor. We could also see the score editor in the lower zone, so usually defaults to the key editor. But if you click here in the editor, we could also just say I want to see this in my drum editor or my score editor in the lower zone. Okay. All right, Beverly Beatty just says, great question. How do you create basic guitar tabs from a WAV/MP3? So currently in Cubase, there's, we could do just a single, just a single voice. So we're not going to be able to do audio to MIDI conversion, from a chord. But let's say if I had, like a guitar solo, let me see, like if I wanted to take, we have some single notes played in this song at the start. So let's say I want to come here. Let's just listen to this project. All right, and I'll just... All right, so let's say I want to do that. So I'm going to go into Vari Audio. Let's enable Vari Audio since we have kind of like a melodic pattern that's just kind of monophonic. And we will now, within Vari Audio, come over here. And so once we have our Vari Audio editor, click here, we're going to extract the MIDI. Okay, so we'll call this our guitar part. And let's open up our score editor. So I haven't done any tempo detection on this yet. So I think if we now come over here to instrument definitions, that we could, so I just went to settings to instrument definitions, and we can see, okay, I just want to do my guitar tablature, and we can say show rhythms on the tab. So now we could just see our guitar tablature automatically extracted. But if it's going to be chords, or more than one voice, it's not going to be able to determine that. But if it's a single voice, again, just come directly, and it helps if you just kind of call the track guitar, and then in the score editor again, because after doing the extraction, go to settings, to instrument settings, and then for strings and tuning, and you could adjust the tuning. So if you have like an alternate tuning here, and then just choose to show tablature, and you can show tablature with rhythms, and hit OK. There you go. All right, I'm going to paste the Zoom chat. We'll be starting in a little under an hour. All right, so we see Matt Elston joining us. All right, we see from Sable Winters says, Greg, thanks. I'll follow those instructions. The tempo marks made it cluttered. I agree. That would do it for me. Can I change to jazz fonts and enlarge? It's too small. All right, so let's jump back to our example. So I'll take this. We will do a quick tempo detection of it. Or we'll do our quick okay, so say we come here, let me just again, I'll just come to the tempo. And let me just see if I come over here. So we have all of our tempos here. Let's again go to score settings. And I think if I just turn that off. All right, so let's see if we could change the font. All right, so let's go to font styles. So you have the default text font. So if you want to make the font larger, and you could switch between. So let's see if we adjust our font size up here. And let's see if there's a chord symbols font. So I'm going to select the chord symbols font, and we'll make this so you could just adjust accordingly there. And let me just see if there's check for if there's so let's say if we want to make it more like you could also just kind of change the fonts here under score settings for the chords. as well. All right. All right, great to see Tim K joining from Zeiss in the Netherlands. Got buddies waving a paw hello to my cat Steven and other pets that are nearby. He's ready to learn. He's received 1 gallon of lemon drop ice cream cake. Michael Teens is on fire. All right. Okay, so Chiluminaire says, hi, what is the recommended Cubase workflow for achieving a target loudness level using supervision, LUFS target for music releases? So generally, a lot of times, you may want it to be a lot of streaming services. There's no absolute rule on this, but a lot of streaming services may kind of aim for like minus 14 LUFS. Now, one easy way to achieve this, so let's say, okay, I have an audio file here. Let me just import a file. Just for demonstration, so let's import an audio file. All right, let's try one more time. Okay, so let's say this is our mix down file, and let's say we listen to it here. And if I wanted this to be like minus 14, so the supervision will show us like what the metering is. So if I come over here to my control room, inserts, and we can see our supervision. So if you are aiming for like a delivery, you could just come over here. Let's go to your audio and let's go to processes, and we can choose normalize. And here we could actually just do loudness normalization based on LUFS. So I'm just going to type in minus 14. And now the file will be at minus 14 LUFS. So we undo that. Let me just... So we could come over here again to process, say normalize if you want. That will normalize the file to minus 14 loudness units. So that's a quick way of doing it. So, supervision is good for seeing, what files or what is below and what the current values are of the mix, but you could just take your final mix and normalize it to minus 14 LUFS or whatever LUFS value you want to use. All right. So we see Sable will be about 20 to 30 minutes late to Zoom. Says Greg, now a tricky one. Wanted to do the Dom Segal's tempo change at course plus 1 BPM. I had a vocal track using ARA, and when changing the tempo, the vocal track just disappeared. Can you use ARA on an audio track and then do tempo changes plus 1 BPM to show it's something that can be done? So I would always do the tempo changes after rendering the ARA file, because, when you're going into the ARA, it's then kind of playing back through the engine of it's playing back through the engine of the external editor. So when that external editor is probably not going to recognize tempo changes, because most of them are going to be doing like specific audio tasks. So I would do all of my AR editing and then duplicate the track, do a new track version, and render it to an audio file, and then do the tempo changes. But most of the external editors aren't necessarily going to be tempo synced once the audio is actually in the external editor. All right, so we see Jay the Jolly says Zoom setup, but I can only get the mic to register on the left side as mono input 1. Focusrite control only wants to allow stereo connection. Hope that will tolerate if voice is used. So I'm sure it'll be fine. We could hear you. So looking forward to seeing you on the Zoom. All right, so Wilfried joining from Bochum, Germany. Thanks for being online. All right, and Wilfried just asking if there's a Zoom stream today. So yes. All right, so GR Voices says, hi, Greg. George in Atlanta on Mac. Is there a way to turn off the pop-up toolbar? I have it disabled in settings and conf in Windows 15, but it still pops up on continued left-click ideas. Okay, so when we have the pop-up toolbar, so when you go to, like, if it's like you wanted to right-click and not have the toolbar, there isn't a way to do that I know of. So when you go to, let's say, your settings or your preferences, and we go to under your tools, you'll see show toolbox on right. So what this will allow you to do is, it used to be that you had two choices. One was that you could have context-sensitive menu options with the tools, or you could just have the toolbox. So if you wanted like the right click to do something else, it's always going to be, and it's like Cubase 1 on Atari days that, we have the right mouse button to access context-sensitive tools. So when we turn off that preference, when we select an event here, we can just say, oh, now I want to run a plugin, I want to move, I want to do a fade, that we could just simply have that context sensitive and the tools over here. And if you hold down just the Alt or Option key, you could just toggle back and forth between those two modes if you want. But, when it says show toolbox and right click, if that's unchecked, it will show kind of it'll show all of the context sensitive settings plus the tools that you could access off the little pop out window. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding or if that makes sense. All right, so we see from Jay the Jolly says, seems to only want to do input 1 and 2. Can't find a way to set input 1 as mono and Focusrite control, it seems. So it may automatically be mixing it when it's using it as like a audio driver for the operating system, so that when you're playing back at YouTube, it doesn't just show, it doesn't play just a left or right channel, always kind of have a stereo out. All right, great to see Lawrence checking in from Barn Door Recording in Rhode Island. Okay, so we see My Felt Music says, why doesn't any of the modulators sync with the 3/4 or 9/8 time signature, for example, LFO or even the FX modulator? Insert, why is that? All right, so let's take a look. I'll just do a new project. It's in 3/4. let me set my signature track here to 3/4. Okay, so let's say I want this to be 12 steps. Okay, so let's say okay, so let's put, so we're in 3/4. Let's put like just a quick volume plugin. So let's get to our modulator. All right, so we want to control all right, so let's say we have half notes here, whole notes. So let's say I wanted a dotted half note. So I would just kind of come over here. Now it's working in 3/4 time. So when you go to, so try just doing a dotted value. Because what it's playing, if you want to do that for three beats, it's a dotted half note. But let's say if I want to do dotted quarter notes, so just use a dotted value. So if I wanted to now add an instrument track and do something similar, I could come right over here. All right, so let's say if we put this on a loop here. And I wanted to adjust my filter. So we'll come over here to our modulators again. And we'll set this and then that will just sync in 3/4 time. So let me know if that makes sense and works for you. So try different rhythmic values. So if you want to do triplets, you could do that. If you want to set the different rhythmic values, just go around your dial here so you get up to 30-second dotted values, 30-second triplets, so whatever you want it to do. Or dotted values, triplets, regular. So all right, so we see all right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios joining. So it's great to talk to you the other day, on Wednesday. All right. All right, so we see Rick from Bratman Studio. Thanks for being on. Just looking forward to being on the Zoom. So we see what's your main process of starting a track? So I think a lot of people will start with drums, but it's really anything. To me, it's always about whatever the catalyst is, whether it's like you're humming something in your head, whether it's a guitar lick, whether it's a drum beat, whether it's a piano chord progression, anything that is the catalyst for you. And, can a song start with any of those? Yes. Is it wrong for any of those to be kind of the inception or the catalyst of creativity? No. So whatever, takes, some people, it's like the classic, do you write the lyrics first or the song, the music first? It's like some people will write the lyrics and then next song they'll write the music first. There's no right or wrong answer. So whatever you need, whatever starts the process, just be ready to record it, whether it's MIDI, whether it's audio. Some people I know will just have recordings going all the time and will just, record hours of them noodling, and they may catch like one little thing. And it's like, oh, okay, that was a cool lick. And if I didn't record that, then I wouldn't, that would be lost to all time. Phil Ramone was great at this because he would have, often like a DAT recorder. He would have a recorder constantly going on. So because so many times you doubt the creative process and it's like, oh, if it only was that thing we did 2 hours ago, that was so much better. And Phil would be the guy who would say, okay, let's rewind the tape from 2 hours ago. It's like, oh, that was really cool. Or you thought that was better, but it was actually really awful. But he would kind of document his sessions all the time so that, people could go back and they could listen to it. And he was like just exceptional at that. So whatever you do, just capture whatever idea as you're starting off your project. All right, so we see Vince has a new headset mic he's going to use on Zoom today. I find it easier. All right, so we see, hey Greg, how do I draw and control volume curves on more than one event at a time? So it could be different if, so when we do it, there isn't a way to automatically put it on kind of multiple events. So, but let's say if I come over here, I'll just duplicate this track and we'll duplicate it one more time. So let's say I have now like automation going on. So I want to come over here. Let's just do like a volume change. So I want to grab kind of my volume tool here, and let's say, okay, I want to adjust my volume like so, and I want that on all of the other tracks. So there's a lot of consequences to replacing existing events accidentally. What you can do is just select like the automation, and you can say copy all the automation of that selected track, and you could do keyboard shortcuts. We could paste that same automation, come here and paste that same automation. So that way it's kind of intentional, and you're not kind of overwriting like what was the perfect automation, and your song will go number one because you erased the automation accidentally because the track was linked. So this way we can just do all those particular changes and copy the automation and apply it to other tracks. All right. I forgot to put in cowbell again. Sorry. All right. Sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Okay. All right, so great to see David M. checking in from Liverpool. All right. All right, so we see, Greg, are there any extra online presets for Pad Shop 2 Trip that I can add to Cubase? I don't know if there's any for Trip, but there are a number of online sound sets for Pad Shop, and Gary Gibbons, who's done like all sorts of amazing videos. He's created just some like wonderful Pad Shop expansions that are really exceptional. I just can't praise Gary's work as a sound designer. So let's say expansions for Pad Shop. So you can see that, let's see, 12, 16. Yeah, so there's 16 different expansions for Pad Shop. So if you just kind of do Pad Shops and presets, so there's, check out like, and just listen to like the different presets, so like the violin and violence, such a great name. Check these out. They're all great to work with. Granular guitars, granulars, yeah. So lots of great Pad Shop expansions. All right, so we have Oris Tinal Tail says, hey man, can I ask a simple thing? I'm assembling my first home studio at 2026 with an audience. It's possible for Cubase to get a latency with effect in record like Apollo DSP. It's not the same of Apollo. So yeah, you could definitely do it. So, all you have to do is like when you go to record, so, the Apollo will have built-in effects DSP. There's a lot of plugins where you could, when we go to, let's say we're going to add an audio track, we go to our mix console. And we come over here and we see these red channels, and these red channels are our input channels. So if you go to your input channel, we could actually just come right over here and we could see, okay, I want to record with a compressor. So I could just come over here and put a compressor on. Now, when we do this, there's a chance that some plugins may cause additional latency. And you could get a sense if you go to like your VST plugin manager, and let's say, okay, I go to my VST effects. So when I come over here And we'll show all the plugins. So let's say, okay, I want to go to the compressor here. And once we actually, you could see right here a latency figure. So let's say, okay, put the distortion on, latency 0. So you could just put that on. Now, some plugins that do look ahead, when you look at the actual, when you select it here, so like a multi-band compressor, there's a latency of 5,442. But let's say I want to record with the Studio EQ. So I could come right over here. Let's select our Studio EQ. And our Studio EQ is 0 seconds of latency. So I could put that plugin on an input channel that the audience is connected to and record the guitar directly through that. And thanks for joining us on the live stream, and we hope to answer many more questions as you get to know Cubase better. Hope to see you back. All right, so Drazi Eternal asks, hey Greg, how do you upload a PDF score to Dorico? So there's nothing that's going to directly translate a PDF score. Many of the tools that have done it over the years are just kind of plagued with inaccuracies. So by the time you fix all the errors in translation, it's often quicker to input the entire score. So, you know, there's some new apps that you can scan sheet music and convert it to a music XML file. I think one's like PlayScore or that I've heard some people say that they like. And then, you know, but inevitably most of the, you know, take a PDF and convert it into notation. It's not quite as robust as it seems like it should be. All right. All right, great to see Peter Raymond checking in from Winnipeg. Thank you for your email. It's really nice to get your email. All right, see, Flybeat's got a new laptop chair. All right, let's get to some questions that were mailed in. All right, so we had a question on how to use the trim automation mode. What is trim automation? All right. Okay, so let's say we want to come over here and we open up the automation for a particular track and just get my automation settings here quickly. And okay, so let's say we have automation curves here like this for our track. All right, so when we play this track back, we're going to, you know, we'll see our automation. Let me just turn it down. Sorry about that. All right, now what trim automation is going to do, and we could enable this in our transport, in our automation panel. So you could hit F6 and turn trim automation on in Cubase 1502. You could also go to your automation panel here and enable trim automation. Now when you do that, we see the existing automation here. And what we want to do is the trim automation is this is going to allow us to kind of attenuate the existing automation curves. Now, when we go to our settings in the automation, we could choose to, on leaving, like when does this automatically take effect? We could do it manually, or we could say on leaving trim mode, and we'll show what this does. So we see my automation pyramid here. So we'll say the Chichen Itza or Great Pyramids of Giza in outside of Cairo. So we see these automation curves, but maybe I want to grab the fader and be able to just kind of attenuate that louder or softer in different spots. So enable trim. So if I'm here, this is our trim automation button. I'm going to now turn on and let's automate our particular track. So I'm going to select the track. And as I grab the fader, let's say right here, just make sure we're looking at the right. So now when I adjust my automation, let's move this up or down. So let's say I like everything that we just done. I'm going to go back to the beginning. So I see two different automation lines. So I see what was the original automation here, and then we see what we just had automated with the trim mode. So now if we wanted to take like the full kind of triangular curves here, I leave trim mode and we can see that the automation has now been attenuated. So it's kind of similar to what we do with VCA automation. So, if you have a whole track that's too loud or too soft, we could keep kind of the overall contour of the automation, or we could alter the contour of existing automation. And that's what trim mode does. All right, so next question mailed in. I can hear an instrument track only when the yellow-orange speaker box is activated. When I create a new instrument track, it is usually muted, and I have to first turn off the yellow listen button for the air tracks and turn on the new one. I recall that in my old Cubase 9, it worked automatically without the tedious work. Is there something misconfigured? All right, so let's say I have my project here soloed. I have solo engaged in my project. I go to a new project. That solo state will stay. So I come over here, I add a new project. You may notice that as we add an instrument track, that it will be muted because the global solo state is turned on. So before you start a new track, I'm going to do a new project here. And as we do a new project, and we add an instrument track, now that the global solo state is disabled, our instrument track will show up as not being muted. So make sure, like if you're working from a template, that you don't have the kind of solo states active in the project, because that could go and carry forward to a new project. All right, so we see question. Please explain in detail how to insert a song text with verse, chorus, second verse under the first into the score editor from a text editor, copy paste under the notes, and how to precisely align every syllable under the desired note, and how to correct mistakes. All right, so if you want to do like, verse, chorus, etc. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to just create like a marker track. And on my marker track, I have this set to, I have intro, verse, chorus, and we'll have this as our primary marker track. Now, when I go into the score editor, those will show up as like rehearsal marks right here. So we can see intro, verse, chorus, and let me just adjust this so we can, let me just go into the list editor so it'll look a little more as expected. So I'll come over here, I'm going to delete different MIDI channels. So I'll come over here, let's say I kind of want to select sorry, let me just do it one more time. So we have like 4 notes duplicated from my controller. All right, so now when we go into our score editor, we can see like intro, verse, chorus, bridge. So the marker track can automatically be carried directly over for different song. All right. Now let's say if we have notes that were in, and we see it says underverse into the score editor from a text editor, copy paste under notes, how to precisely align every syllable. So let's say if I have text, I think I have some lyrics. Let's say if I wanted to put lyrics on. All right, so let me see if I could do this. I'm going to copy these lyrics. Let me see if this works inside of Cubase. So I'm going to hit my lyrics pop over. So we'll come here to text, lyrics. And since I copied the text from here, now I'm just going to hit Command or Control V, and we can see that the music will automatically adjust and the lyrics are going to be tied directly with the notes. So select it, copy it, go to hit the text toolbox here, select the lyrics, click on the note, and then just hit Command or Control V to paste, and that will paste all the notes directly to the lyrics. Okay, next question. How do you set up fades / crossfades so they keep the same settings every time you add fades, crossfades? For example, I want 5 millisecond curve fades always. Okay, so let's take a look at, let me just put a loop in. Okay, so let's say if we come over here. All right, so let's say I do a fade here. All right, so we can set our length. And let's see if this will change if we go to seconds. So let's say I want to set my length to, let's say, so it may not be exactly into 5 milliseconds. All right, and let's say I want this as my curve. All right, so I could now save this as my default curve. So now every time that I do like a fade, we can just simply come right over here and you could adjust kind of, as soon as we do a fade in or fade out, that we could adjust that curve. So let's come over here. And as you do fades, you can just do that. Now there's something else you do. Well, if you always want it to play back at different, like if you don't want to have to edit curves, one of the things that you could do that a lot of people miss is the auto fade settings. So let's say if I do a cut here, if you're doing like 5 milliseconds all the time, I could come over, and if you go right here to the auto fade settings, you could have like a curve for your fade in and your fade in, fade out. You can set the length here to 5 milliseconds, and then anytime you do a cut, it can automatically, like anytime that there's a cut, it'll automatically do that fade with that particular time by default without you having to do it. It's not a fade that you edit, But every time if I come over here and click, it would just do an automatic fade in and fade out between two events. So again, come over to each track and you could set up your default length for fade ins, fade outs, and crossfades right there. So anytime you do a cut, you don't have to manually put a fade in. You could just simply, as soon as it does that, it plays back the fade in and fade out. Okay, so next question. Says, if you highlight an event and hit enter, you open a new window with more options. All right, so let's say if I come over here, I hit enter. Okay, so I'll just take out a very audio. All right. Okay. It says, when doing this, I wanted to open exactly where I placed the cursor. Isn't that what's supposed to happen? Well, it doesn't. All right, so let's say if I click here, I click on the event, but that doesn't necessarily, there are some settings. So if we go to your transport and we just turn on video files edit mode, when I click on an event, the cursor will automatically go there. So let's come over. Notice that my cursor, my playhead position stays right here. When I go to my transport and turn on video files edit mode, that now when I select an event, the cursor automatically moves to the start of that event. It says new window opens at a random place. So you have to look for the right spot. I want to edit a course, for example. I highlight the event, place the cursor events where I want to start working from, and hit enter. I have the cursor set to bar 25. When I hit enter, the new window opens at 87. Feels totally random where it opens. Yeah, so try just setting that. So anytime that you click an event, the cursor just immediately jumps to that particular event. And again, it's under transport, video follows editing, on off. All right, so we see I was working on a project with a bunch of automation points. A way to mute specific automation points would be useful. There isn't a way to do that, right? Can you automate the read and write buttons? I don't think you could automate the read or write button. Let's just take a look. So let's come over here because obviously, so let's just see if we're doing this. So because, and it's almost like, it could be kind of an interesting state because if you're, how do you write the fact that, it's like automating something to turn on when it's off. Like, so there isn't like a real way of being able to do that if you wanted to select a range of automation. What you could do is just, if you wanted to, I'll just create a new lane here. So let's say if I copy this automation and paste it here, so even if I just copy that and paste, I could now so I could select all of the automation points on this. So let's say I select all the events, and then I could just simply move up. I could nudge the events up here. So let's say, and so we could just select all of these automation points, and if you wanted to just delete those automation points, and then you go, okay, I want to copy these and paste them back. You could put it into a dummy automation track, but there isn't a way to automate, automation being muted. But if you wanted to just kind of park the automation, if you wanted to go back, But you could obviously select a portion of the automation and just delete it, and then that would be in essence muting it. And you could create a macro to open up a different automation lane, park it, and then copy it and undo if necessary. So, okay, next question. Having problems with the order of hot swapping samples. Can you please walk me through step by step on how to do this? Okay, so let's say we're going to okay, so let's say we'll come here and we're gonna just have a pattern playing back, let's say a kick drum in the sampler track. All right, so we come here to, all right, so we just have this pattern, and I want to swap out these, I go to my sampler control. So let's look for other kick drums. So I'm going to come over here to my media bay, and let's say, okay, I want to go to let's say bouncy, and I want to look for kicks. All right, so what I'm going to do is turn on this little icon here, and this is a hot swap preview. So the two arrows pointing to the left or right. So say I like that, then I would just hit the check box, and I would apply that hot swap, and the sample is replaced. So again, just click here, and it could depend on the instrument. So Groove Agent will work the same way. The drum machine will work the same way. So let's say we go to a different library. Okay, so I want to come over here. Let's look for, and then I like that sample. So that way you're doing it in context while it's playing. So click on the hot swap. And you like it, click on the checkbox to load that hot swap sample over. All right, so we see a question. It is easy to tell which folder MIDI or which folder directory the audio files came from, but not sure how one figures out which directory / folder a MIDI file came from. All right, so audio files, as audio files are created, they're automatically recorded to the hard disk. So hence the term hard disk recording. So the files are going directly and written to the hard disk. MIDI is often going to be saved into memory. So unless you save the Cubase project, you save a MIDI file or MIDI loop, the MIDI doesn't exist as a separate entity because the MIDI is actually in memory and it's going to be stored within the project file. So it's not generally, most MIDI tracks aren't going to reside independently. Like if I come over here and I look at my project, it's not going to reside independently of the project where it needs to be imported. Every audio file is a separate file that is recorded, but when I come over here, this MIDI information doesn't exist independently of the project. It exists when I open the project and that collection of MIDI notes will play, or if I export it as a MIDI file, I could import the MIDI file or export a MIDI loop and import it. But generally the MIDI information on the project, or the MIDI information in the project, isn't saved independently of the project file. All right. So let's say, next question. If I listen to some chords, I have no clue what scale or key they're in. Let me start this little. So this may be a challenge as I have limited experience creating chords and not good on keyboard. If I listen to some chords, I have no clue what scale or key they are in. I have to pull out the chord into repeat mode in Cubase and figure out what notes manually where they are. But with AI, new tools helping us, I'm using this plugin to detect the scale. It claims that my notes I played in are in B minor. How could I set up chord pads for a B minor scale? All right, so when we go to our chord pads, we can just come over here and there's different presets. So if you go to your scale, now scale is just a pattern of intervals. All right, so we see scale, and each of these are modes. So, basically we'll have major, which is Ionian mode, and this is a major scale. Now, if we start a major scale on the second note and keep all the same notes, but start on a second note, that would be a Dorian mode. And then what we have here is natural minor, Aeolian mode. So go to the natural minor, load up that chord pad preset. And what you want to do is set the root key here to B. And now all of your particular chords, as we go to listen to it, will automatically be set up for B minor. And then you'll have the seventh chords that fit within B minor. So you could just come right over here and here's all of the chords that fit that particular scale. All right, let me jump back, see if there's any more live questions, and we'll start our Zoom social meetup in just a minute or two. All right. All right, Nick Quado says, hey, I want to be able to control my mod wheel in CC11 on orchestral VST. How do I link CC11 to my fader on my MIDI keyboard? So generally, when you, I come over here, let's go to Quick Hallian Sound, and I'm going to move my modulation wheel. We have a MIDI insert plugin, so let's come over here. And there's one called, not on inserts rather, but MIDI inserts. So you could just say, okay, and there's a MIDI monitor. So I'm going to turn that on. And now when I move, let's say this particular, so we select note here and we move parameters. Let me just turn off. I can move the modulation wheel and we see the modulation. So what's happening is your controller is actually transmitting the MIDI messages. So you would need to go into your controller. So if I move a fader here on my controller, okay, this controller is controller 42. This controller is controller 46, 45. So we could just see what controller it is. So generally, you would go into your controller and remap what MIDI CC message or what MIDI message that knob, fader, slider is transmitting, and then Cubase will accept that in for you. So it's best to actually do that directly within the controller. All right. So we see just a quick last question before we start to zoom is how is Steinberg Iconica compared to orchestral tools, VST instrument, Berlin orchestra? Is it the same or something else? So orchestral tools did all of the sampling and Steinberg did all of the editing. So they're different libraries, different performances, different musicians. But I believe that the Iconica Opus is on an amazing sale. So there'll be two different flavors of orchestral instruments. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and start our Zoom meetup. So again, I'll post the Zoom link. And for those people who missed it, if you watched the very beginning of the video, you could see the Zoom ID as the password. This is only going to be live for 2 hours. It's not going to be captured or recorded again. So, and it's just a great way to meet other people that are on the Zoom. So I'm going to launch the Zoom meetup. It's just a great way to meet people. So let's go ahead. I'll start the meeting. Great. So we see Brian Sawyer, Tim Weinheimer, and a Memento. See Peter joining.
Here, buddy.
All right, we have Tim K. Great to see you on, Tim. Jay the Jolly on.
What you doing?
Fly V.
Hey. Yeah.
Klaus joining from Malmo.
Testing my microphone.
Yep, we can hear you. John Barry, we have Soren.
Hello there, everyone.
Right, so we have David M. Hey.
Good evening.
Good to see you, John.
Good to see all you fellas.
We have Rick joining.
I do not know if my microphone is working.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Ah, okay. I just don't see a green square around myself.
All right, and for those that are still on the live stream, here's the meeting ID. If you go to Zoom, and again, this is going to be on May 29th. So if you join us tomorrow or 6 years from now, this meeting won't be live. I've had people complain. It's like, I was watching the live stream and the meeting's over. What happened? You know, it's like, oh, it happened like 3 weeks ago. Oh. All right, so we have more people in the waiting room. All right, so we see Beverly joining us. All right, great. Jonathan, Jay, Alex. The live stream is always really fascinating discussions. So look forward to seeing our regular attendees and meet new people as well. So I think, Jonathan, we could hear the live stream coming back through your audio.
Just testing the audio. It's working. Okay.
Yep,
Hey,
we
Greg.
can hear you. Hey,
Great.
How are you?
good. I'll leave the live stream up for another minute, and then we'll migrate over fully to the Zoom.
Yeah, I'll make sure to shut that down this time so it doesn't frequency.
Mhm.
I did that last time, I think.
I set some audio background cancellation on. I'm sorry if my chair is still going through because it's very squeaky.
No, we're not hearing it, so yeah. All right, I'm going to end the live stream. Bear with me just for a second here.
Cool.
On the wrong computer. I have too many computers to make a live stream happen here. It's like, well, why can't I turn it off there? It's like, oh, it's the wrong computer. All right, so, all right.
Greg, I thank you so much for helping me out the other day, man. You came in like Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan, like my only hope. I appreciate it. And in light of that, I'm willing to take those computers off your hand because, I mean, reciprocity, right?
All right,
Good
so I'm going
stuff
to end the stream here. All right, and with that, let me end this, and then we'll migrate to the full Zoom.
Sweet.
All
Yeah,
right.
Greg, you're an awesome person. I really respect all of your knowledge and